Welcome, everyone. We are here with Judit Polgar, the legendary chess player, one of the greatest chess players of all time, one of the greatest chess prodigies in history, to talk with her about her unique childhood, her unique path toward becoming a perennial top 10 chess player, and ultimately one of the world's most legendary and accomplished chess players. Judit, thank you so much for being with us, and I hope you're ready to dive into the
Oh,
past with
absolutely.
us.
I'm very happy to share with you some of my most memorable games.
Obviously, in this series, everyone, we're going to get into so much fun. We're going to talk about her childhood. We're going to talk about so many incredible victories she had, and of course, throwing down against some legendary players like Garry Kasparov, Alexei Shirov, and more. But to start, we're going to go back and look at a game that, Judah, for me, is an absolute personal favorite. When the team worked hard to kind of dive into some of your greatest victories, I remembered using this game as one that I would talk about to my students as a great example of how to launch a coordinated attack, especially with the black pieces. So I just had to fanboy out for a minute and tell you that I'm very excited to go over this game, and and that's it. We
Oh,
ready to jump in?
absolutely. I have great memories from this game. I was very young at the time,
Okay.
only 11 years old.
Well, here we go. Only 11 years old and already playing chess this way. So we start out with d4 knight f6, and you invited a Benko gambit, right? Your opponent doesn't go for the
Yeah,
Benko
when I
at
was a
this time.
child, I was playing different gambits myself with white and with the black color. So my plan was after d5 to play b5, the banco. Absolutely.
Okay. So if d5, b5, and that was part of your style in general. You were an aggressive player looking to get gambits and get attacking chess on the board whenever you could,
Yes,
really,
I
right?
was very much raised the way that I should look for attack to be an active player, which shows also in my games, and also this one of the clear example of that. And my opponent wanted to play pretty solidly by playing knight f3 and move 3, and kind of having an
Yep.
English attack, somewhere very solid, developing simply after capturing the pawn on d4, knight d4, and this is what
Yep.
happened in the game. You can go e6, knight c6, several just very regular move. But I was ready to have also some sharp idea in this position, and I went e5, which was actually played in the late 70s. I think it was Zeitlin who introduced the gambit. Later on in the 80s, Vaganyan, who was a very cool, very interesting player from Armenia. And also later on, Kasparov played it. And I think that was the invitation for me to play also when I was a little. And after knight b5, the line goes d5, c takes d5, and obviously here I cannot capture the pawn back because that would be a blunder by knight d5, queen d5,
I'll show it. I'll show it real
and
quick.
knight
Whatever.
c7.
Sorry. Go ahead. A fork at the
Yeah.
end. That's the reason you can't take on
But
d5
anyway,
anymore.
this was not the idea, and it's not the idea of this gambit. So after c takes d5, developing move bishop c5.
Yep. And so you've already sacrificed a pawn, but rapid development with black's pieces coming out. I guess I already spoiled it for the fans that we have a great attack ahead for black, but this is the beginning of black's development, finding compensation for that pawn, right? And so after white develops, you get
Yeah,
castled,
I think
and
it's very important to say that suddenly why black can offer the pawn, because black starts to
okay,
develop very fast, right? So I have two pieces out there,
right,
knight on f6, bishop on c5, and white has a knight on b5, which is not very good located. So actually that's why he also went back. But after knight c3, it's also, we see that there's two knights which would want to occupy the same square, but somehow that square is very
right,
busy. So I castled.
right. Castles and g3, and I'm going to stick with the spoiler. This is the position I would give to students and ask them what they see as the most potentially weak square in White's camp, and how would you launch an attack if you could. So I'm obviously telling you about your own game, but I can't help it. So go for
Well,
it.
the thing is that g3 is a very logical developing move, so white wants to make a fianchetto by playing bishop g2 and castle. And of course, if he's able to do that, then stabilizing the king and having an extra pawn in the center, it will give him a good advantage. But of course, the very typical idea in this structure is to go and jump immediately for attack by knight g4. Attacking on f2 with the c5 bishop, you can see now how powerful it is. So white has not really anything else than playing e3. And after this, of course, you have to have a
Wide
follow-up,
open.
right? Because if knight g4, white goes h3, it just pushes me back. So I had to play,
Right.
continue my idea and to be active. And the only move for that is to play f5.
Logical. And along the theme of using all your pieces, you're actually with the f5 move bringing another piece into the attack, right? Potentially the
Yeah,
rook on
that we'll
f8.
see in the near future of this game. So let's see what white played. Bishop g2. But in this point,
If white had played h3 here, what was your intention?
well, h3 I was not worried. I'm sure I would consider to sacrifice my knight already on f2, but maybe I would go back to f6 because h3 weakens also the g3. So f4 can be very
Right.
powerful. Let's say bishop develops anywhere to g2 or e2, f4 I think. And I kind of
Right.
ruined the whole pawn structure for white. But instead of h3,
Okay.
there was another idea, which is not a logical move. But after f5, some people who would smell danger already, probably they would have played bishop e2 at this point. And the idea is that it stops me playing f4, because then the g4 knight
Right.
is attacked. At the same time, probably I would just go back knight f6, and then the bishop stands pretty strange on e2 because its place should be on g2. And also the d5 pawn
Right.
can be more vulnerable. I can play knight bd7 later, e4, knight e5. So black has pretty good compensation, I believe, because also the c1 bishop is not very active, having the e3 pawn ahead of it. But bishop e2 was something to slow down my attack for sure.
Hard to play bishop e2 when you're facing an 11-year-old kid. You're like, oh, what's this attack going to be, right? So you kind of play bishop g2 and see what happens next, I guess.
Well, you can guess my next move, I think. f4.
Here we go, all in.
Definitely all in, and please just take a look for a second on the development of white, like d1 queen, c1 bishop, knight on b1, rook on a1. It's a real great storage of pieces, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is the stuff of how legendary attacking games are made, right? You're highlighting white's lack of development as a signal. Maybe there's something here. And of course, after h3, here you didn't have to
Well,
be
this is a
asked for too
provocation.
long. How long did you take? How long did you take before you played knight takes f2? Were you excited jumping out of your chair, or were you patiently seeing it as far
I
as you
don't
could?
remember how much time it took me to make the move, but that's for sure that instantly I knew that I'm going to be sacrificing on f2. So this
Yeah.
was so clear to me, even though knight f6 might be not a bad move, but at the time I was very clearly a person who was sacrificing a lot of material in order to get initiative and attack. And this was no question that
Yeah.
I grabbed on f2.
Booyah. A brilliant symbol deserved for the knight on f2 for sure. So forking the queen and rook, there is obviously no choice for white. You have to take the knight,
F
and
takes,
go ahead and take it away. Take
F
this
takes
through.
e3, double check. So
Yeah.
now white has only moved to king e1 because king e2 cannot escape there because of e2, discovered check by the bishop. If king g1,
Right.
then e2.
King
Yeah,
d1
so that's
e2.
winning. King e2 is not possible instead because rook f2 comes with a check and grabbing the bishop in g2. So the only move was to go back to e1. And after this, it was pretty obvious my next move because how do you strengthen your position? Why did I sacrifice the knight? It's not only because I was always very generous, it's because I wanted to get something in return, right? So I went rook f2.
Right.
And basically, my investment for the knight, I got a rook on f2 in a very stable location for my rook. I'm attacking on g2, the bishop, and still keeping the white not be able to develop. And this is something very important, I think, to mention in attacks, that you always make a move when you either check or you attack something or you're threatening something. So the opponent does not have time to develop the pieces and recover the position.
Love it. So rook to g1, kind of kind of the only move here for white, right? To defend the bishop. I guess you could try to
This
move
is
the
what
bishop
I
to
thought
safety,
as
but
well. And you know what? It's not. Rook g1 is the most natural move to
oh,
come, but d6 was possible.
oh
Can you
wow.
imagine?
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I just spotted that.
counterattack is
Okay.
over there. And this is something I completely blundered. I think none of us saw this opportunity. And this was the best move, which after I have two alternatives, I can either go king h8, threatening immediately taking the bishop, or the other idea is to develop immediately and play knight a6, so the c5 bishop is defended. At the same time, I'm still not threatening to capture the bishop in g2. But
Right.
what is really
Okay.
important that I keep white's development behind. But this was something a
Knight
very
a6
good
also had
idea to
chips.
play d6.
Okay. Interesting how we see those counterattacking shots later. That's a hard move to see, but knight a6 looks like white still would have had a lot of hard things to figure out. But okay. So rook g1 was
So rook
played.
g1 was played, and then I had to come up with a continuation how to improve the position, because of course my idea is to develop but attack at the same time. So I played an
Right.
interesting move which I remember I was very proud of. I played queen f8. And the move queen f8 is very powerful if you see. If I wouldn't have a rook on f2, queen f2 would be threatening a mate.
Mhm.
So with this imagination, it's important that starting out with this point, you can think that in the next move, if black would be on move, I could go rook d2 or rook b2, grabbing a pawn. So the main idea is somehow to get rid of the free the square of f2 and then play queen f2. And also, sometimes it can be useful that my bishop on c5 is protected. So this was something I
Uh-huh.
was kind of very happy in this position. And it's not so easy for white to react because, again, his development is very bad. So he went queen d3. Queen d3 is a logical idea from a perspective that he wants to take bishop e3. Of course, this would be the biggest achievement for white to eliminate my e3 powerful pawn because then no mates will be around. So after queen d3, I started out to develop. So what do you think I played?
There's a lot of attacking developing moves here, but the of course I've seen the game, so I won't guess. I'll let students guess as I talk it out, but I like what you did because I think it was the attacking move that has more potential rather than the attacking move that has the superficial threat, right? And I think there's something powerful to how you kind of had the maturity to play a move that had a little more power to it than just a superficial attack of the queen. So, anyways,
I
that's my
played
opinion
knight
of your move.
a6, and somehow you can see in this game that everything is somehow working out perfectly for me. Knight a6, the idea is very
Yeah.
simple. So if bishop e3, then I would go knight b4. And knight on c2 will be showing up shortly, which is not fun at all for white. So bishop e3 was not possible. And
But speaking of the move I was suggesting that you didn't play, bishop f5, can you take us through your thought process? You played the more powerful move, and it's a great move, and like I said, I know the ending, but did you consider bishop f5, and what were your thoughts on why this was not the right way to develop with a tempo? I think a lot of people would play that.
it is very simple because I consider that bishop f5 is possible, of course, and then I have to think about knight e4. Most likely he would be doing something like this, or bishop e4. But the reason I just didn't even spend too much time, I believe, because after knight a6, I understood that white has an only move to protect against knight b4. And it's not only knight b4, but I also potentially have an idea to go knight c5 if I move away my bishop from c5. So after knight a6, if
Mm.
white's only move is a3, then definitely it favors me to include this knight move to a6.
I like how you're describing that though. The thought process of kind of knight a6 the choice because your opponent's options are limited, right? And I know, we'll talk about that, but are you already on the mindset of knowing that you want to choose attacking moves where your opponent has the least amount of options to respond, right? And that was kind of your mindset of why knight a6 must be the right move.
Well, if I can improve my position and then my opponent has a limitation in choosing a defensive move, then absolutely yes. And also the square c5 is somewhat extremely important in this game.
Okay, I love it. So a3 was played, and here
So
we go.
now I came off with bishop f5. So now you see that practically all the pieces, like the two bishops, are very powerful in the attack. The rook I don't have to explain on f2. The queen on f8, sometimes it gives a heart attack for white once it shows up on f2. And the a6 knight, you can say that it's not yet, but I have given a hint that it might show up on c5. So the only piece which is not really active is the a8 rook. But if you look at examining white's pieces, it's practically still white is having a1, b1, and c1 pieces, which are absolutely out of the game. Bishop e3 is always a threat, but really the b1 and the a1 pieces are out of the game completely. So after bishop f5, again, I'm attacking. I'm putting pressure. So I'm asking white, what do you want to do? And then bishop e4. What else? Bishop e4.
So you mentioned knight e4 earlier as another way to block, right? Obviously, white kind of has to block because moving the queen is not many good options there, right? So did you look at knight e4 and did you kind of intend the same response that you sort of the same idea
I
you
mean,
had
for
in the game?
example, in the game, you don't necessarily know what you're going to be playing when you play bishop f5. You just know that you want to play bishop f5, and after knight e4, well, I will check whether I have bishop d4 and then knight c5 because there is a pin with the f5 bishop, or am I going to be taking immediately on e4 first and then playing bishop d4 and bringing my other pieces into the game?
Okay. Yeah.
So there are
Makes sense.
extremely
E4
lot of tactical ideas once I exchange the bishops and I move the rook, and having rook queen f2 kind of fantastic checks. So of course at this point it is also very challenging in an attacking position like this when you feel that it should be winning and then you have a lot of different options. But you have to make at the same time the perfect one, or definitely the one which is most practical. At the same time, you also go for the beauty prize in some cases. And now you can see that I eliminated one of the bishop, which was a defender, because my c8 bishop was not attacking. The g2 bishop was kind of defending. So we made an exchange, which I can say that probably it improved black's position. And now I went bishop d4. But if we can go back for a second, because knight e4 was an interesting idea. Not now, after bishop e4.
Oh, okay.
Bishop takes e4, knight e4. And now again, of course, there is a lot of options for black because knight f2 is not a threat, obviously. But I think e2 was the best to play.
Wow.
So this is also an option and a problem for white. Threatening with rook f3, for example, and then attacking the g1 rook, or even rook h2 at some point. So rook f1 is threatening, of course. Yeah. So it's very painful for white.
Yeah. Quite the sight to behold with a pawn on e2 there. Okay, so that was your plan on knight e4. Got it.
And it's important because, of course, that's the most appealing move for white, to centralize the knight, to free up a space for the other knight on c3, right? Also attacking the c5 bishop. So that would be definitely the best move if it would have worked.
Got it.
So after queen e4, I went bishop d4, obviously. Obviously bishop d4, and now there is a huge problem for white. Because what to do? My knight is threatening to jump into c5 from the side. And then you see all the weaknesses on d3, apart from threatening the queen, but the b3 square also. So there is a huge harmony between my pieces, and there is very little in his. The only thing he can say that he has an extra one. So
Yeah.
white took bishop.
It's pretty to look at, although my coach would come over and just take the piece off the board when he was analyzing the game to show that I never used it. It was kind of a mean thing to do, but it left an impression, obviously, because 'cause I'm still talking about it, so, okay, so bishop d4, and you mentioned the brilliancy prize. Did you already have stars in your eyes about the potential of what was coming here?
Well, I was very excited about the whole game because I saw so many things. I was calculating so much in this position during the whole game, and it's only, what is it? It's move 18 or 19, something like that. So I had full
18, yeah.
of brilliancy lines. I was not sure whether it was all working, but in the game it seemed like it was working. And actually, it was only one day before my birthday. So I thought, well, if this game
Oh,
I
wow.
win, this is a cool, cool present for myself.
Yeah. So bishop d4 was met with white. White finally gets the move, right? He's been trying for the whole time. Bishop takes
Actually,
e3, but
B4,
a little bit too little
can
too
you
late.
imagine that B4
Okay.
was something white could be fighting still pretty much? I
Okay.
can even think of knight
Yeah.
c5, to be honest. Because after b4,
Oh, okay.
knight c5, giving up the knight.
Oh,
Even this is something I can consider, and taking back with the queen and then bring the rook also. This is something very powerful. But if we don't play knight c5 and I just want to play the normal move, which I was planning to play after b4, I was planning to play rook c8. And the
mhm.
line would go bishop e3. Finally, white can get rid of the pawn on e3. And then I would go rook takes e3, knight takes e3, bishop c3, king d1. I would grab the rook on a1. Bishop takes f2. And then queen takes f2.
Somehow.
And, well, I think definitely we can say black is better. But still, at least white is also has
Yeah.
some activity. And my knight on a6 finally not able to jump to c5 and attack the queen. But obviously this was the must move what white had to do b4 by any cost to prevent my knight going to c5. Because the way the game happened, if we go back until, so instead of
Yeah.
b4, he went bishop e3. And then I went knight c5 finally. I was bringing in my knight to activity, and here my opponent took on d4 with the bishop. And this is again something, I think it's an interesting moment for amateur players, because when you see a queen hanging, you just grab it usually instantly. And this is a moment I was very
Right.
proud that I was not taking the queen, because after I take the queen, knight takes e4, where I still believe that black should be clearly better, but simply ignoring the queen on e4 and not capturing it, but taking the bishop just made the whole game finish in a few moves, because the knight is hanging, the queen is hanging, and after queen d4, finally my last piece came into the game. Rook
Wait.
e8 check, king d1, and queen f3, and my opponent resigned because after king c1, knight b3 completes the attack.
You're playing a brilliancy, as you said, when you're declining capturing a queen, right? You're taking on d4 to bring the last piece into the attack rather than grabbing the materials. So
Yeah.
that was pretty awesome. That's a pretty awesome game. The question I have is, I talked about in the beginning. I've used this game to talk about how black should attack many times, and I didn't save that for the end. What do you think the best takeaway is for a student in this game? If you were to kind of highlight the themes of how you developed the attack and where it ultimately ended, what would you say some of the nice attacking lessons are for a student?
Well, first of all, I think if someone has a style and they know about themselves, that they like initiative, they like to attack, they like sacrificing, then go for an opening, something like that. Then it's okay to sacrifice a pawn, and then you understand the spirit of the position, that you have to go forward. Sometimes you shouldn't be afraid of sacrificing something. So it works only that way. If you're attacker, you sacrifice something, go all the way until the end. Don't chicken out in the meantime at some point, because many times there is a point, there is no way back. It's only forward. So this is
Yeah.
something, generally, I think it's very important to remember. And if you know your openings, then like I did the patterns, because this knight f2 sacrifice is a very typical pattern in this opening. And I think it's very important that I understood and knew that this can work out, and it's not something that it's a 3-move attack and tactical checkmate, but it's a long-term
Yeah.
sacrifice where you have compensation, and you have to have the self-confidence also that you're playing without material, but you know that you have enough compensation, so you have to be ready for calculating quite a lot as well.
I love it. Be up for the fight. So, did you end up winning a fighting award or a brilliancy prize for this game at this
Yes, I
tournament?
got a brilliancy prize for this, and actually, the Swiss bank was the sponsor of the whole event, so I got a golden bar.
Do you still have the
No,
golden bar?
unfortunately.
Oh
But
no.
this game was played in 1987, so it was more than 35
Okay.
years ago. It happens.
So you're 11 years old in 1987, and again, speaking as if there might be a few fans watching this who aren't aware about the fact that you would go on to break Bobby Fischer's record for the youngest grandmaster in history, along with a lot of greatness to follow. But give us a little bit of your childhood real quick before we wrap up this first game. When did you start playing chess if you're 11 in 1987? And what are some of your fondest memories and maybe some of the challenges you would share as a young player growing up, especially as it starts to be clear that maybe you've got some talent here for the
I
game?
started to play chess when I was 5 years old, as I have two older sisters and they have been playing already competitively. And so it was a very natural way of growing up for me, that I was playing chess as my sisters. I was not going to school, I was homeschooled. This is why I had the opportunity to study chess daily basis. In the beginning, very little, and then later on, by the age of 11, I was playing like 8-9 hours a day. And also the other thing, what was very interesting in my career, that my parents were always supporting me as a girl to compete with boys and adults, as no matter that you're a girl, you can have your potential and in any way, and be the world champion between everyone. So those were the big dreams since my very young childhood.
It's amazing though. I feel like in the modern era, hopefully with the way we've grown as a species, as societies, now that seems like a foregone conclusion that parents should support their young kids, regardless of their gender, to follow their dreams and pursue it. But in that time, what your parents were doing to push you and your sisters was kind of special and kind of unique, right? And the fact that they believed in you so much and gave you that opportunity, despite the fact that you're an 11-year-old girl competing in a room that at times might have been full of men, right? Only men besides yourself. So, can you share a little bit about how much that meant and maybe how that actually played into who you would become as a player, having their support to kind of challenge the status quo at such a time where it just wasn't that common?
Well, in even today is not so common, right? That girls are competing really with men, especially if you think about on the highest level. For me, it was something very natural,
Yep.
because I was really focusing on how to improve on my chess on daily basis. And for me, it was a game in the beginning. Later on, of course, it became a sport very fast, because I was very competitive myself. And it was also science later on, because when you learn and you try to understand many things, you have to make a lot of research analysis at home before going on to competition. But for me, it was obviously a huge thing that my parents were supportive. They are both teachers. and they always believe that if they can give those potentials the same conditions as they would give to a boy, then we are able to go on the very highest. And I was growing very fast in my career. Somehow I was very engaged with chess. I loved chess. I was very successful. And by the age of 12, I was playing mostly against adults. And also, I became number one in the world women ranking. And being in the, well, I think I was definitely in the top 100 in the world, including everyone.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's inspiring. It tells me we have a lot more to get into in this series, and as you said, they gave you the same platform, the same opportunities the boys were getting, and you achieved more than I guess I would say 99.9999% of men ever in the history of the game. So can't wait to dive into more. We got plenty of games ahead. Next up is Shirov Polgar 1994. Everybody, so tune in, and we will see you in that next video.